Hello everyone, and welcome to Straight Chilling. Each week we watch and review a horror film for your entertainment. You can send all questions and comments to straightchillingpodcast@gmail.com, and don't forget to keep chilling.
Yeah, we straight chillin', serial killing. 5 cold villains on the mic, got you reeling. 5-star ratings from the floor to the ceiling. If you get your 1 star, no time for feelings. Got a demon DJ, all the 1s and 2s. By the name Elzebub, so don't get confused. So grab a seat by the fire, roast them all in 2. And prepare to hear the legend of the Straight Chillin' Crew.
What up, nerds, and welcome to yet another mini cast in which the Straight Chilling Crew brings you a bite-sized version of the podcast you know and love. My name is Bob, and today I wanted to talk to you guys about the latest movie from Oz Perkins called Gretel and Hansel. Oz Perkins is the offspring of Anthony Perkins, and this is his third feature, I believe. He previously directed The Blackcoat's Daughter and I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House. Gretel and Hansel is the first movie he has directed that's gotten a wide theatrical release. This bad boy, as art house as it is, was released to, I think, 2,800 theaters, something like that. So it definitely got a wide release. And I'm going to start this review out with a spoiler-free few minutes, just to kind of let you know what I think about it, and then I'll drop the spoiler warning in case you are still interested in watching the movie. I don't want to totally spill the beans for you right off the bat. So this stars Sophia Lillis, Alice Craig, and Samuel Leakey. The cast is fairly slim. The movie itself is pretty lean. It's 87 minutes long. It's a nice tight movie, tight 3 acts, and it's essentially about the fairy tale that everybody knows. Hansel and Gretel, 2 kids, get lost in the woods. They come across this cabin. They're very hungry. They smell all this delicious food being cooked inside the cabin. And it turns out the lady that is making this food is a witch, and she's fattening these kids up so that she can eat the kids herself. It's more or less, it more or less follows that fairy tale. But the movie itself actually starts out with a fairy tale within this fairy tale that we already know, which is a little confusing, I guess. But it starts off with this monologue about this fairy tale that, as far as I know, is specific to this movie. I've never heard of this one before, but it's about this beautiful little girl. She's wearing a pink hood, not a red hood, and she is essentially evil as hell. Like, her mother gives birth to her. She's beautiful. The whole town loves her, but she's secretly just evil as hell. And she can, like, kill people with her mind. And the moral of the fairy tale is pretty much the same moral as the Hansel and Gretel fairy tale. It's just beware of kind strangers giving you things for nothing. Essentially, the whole point of this movie really is just that, like, you don't ever get something without having to give something. That's sort of, if I had to boil it down, that's kind of the point of it. So they start off with just kind of telling you that fairy tale, and then we're dropped in, and we meet Gretel and Hansel, little kids in the woods. They're living with their mother. Apparently the land has gone barren, and they just have almost no food at all. So Gretel strikes out. She tries to get a job as a housekeeper for this wealthy baron guy, this lord. He's got a large estate, might need a housekeeper. So she goes in for an interview, and the dude is super duper creepy and just not a good guy. You get the vibe that he's really not a good guy. She doesn't get the job. She goes back home. And the kids get kicked out of the house by their grieving mother. She is a widower. She lost her husband recently, and she's just sort of going through a lot of stuff. I don't think she's got her head on straight. She kicks the kids out because she can't feed them. So why not just throw them out in the woods and let them fend for themselves, right? That's probably the most rational thing a mother can do. So they're out on their own. They find some mushrooms, they eat them, they trip some balls, which is kind of funny, and then they run into this bizarre looking cabin. It's sort of like this A-frame jet black cabin that is it's very stylistic and bizarre, but man, they smell some delicious food inside. So they sneak inside, they eat this food, they run into the lady who cooked it. She's a witch. That's sort of all I want to say about the plot up front. Just like generally speaking about this movie, craft wise, it's it's beautiful. It's a beautifully photographed movie. The cinematography is really what makes this movie worth watching to me. It's got a lot of simple shapes. Like I said, the A-frame cabin is like a triangle. The triangle shape repeats itself throughout the movie. The lighting is just beautiful. There's a lot of silhouetted figures off in the distance. You'll have some bright reds, bright blues, like really, really deep, dark shadows. The woods are very ominous. The way the food is photographed, it looks super tasty. There's a lot of what I believe is handy cam shots. You'll get a camera following a character through the woods or through the cabin, and the camera is like trained on their face, and as they take a step, the camera steps with them and like bobs. So you get some like really close up shots of characters that are just very intimate, and I just think there's a lot of really great choices made when it comes to the filming of this movie. It looks phenomenal. The performances by the cast members is also pretty much flawless. I have no complaints whatsoever. The girl that plays Gretel, Sophia Lillis, you may recognize her from the most recent It movies. She's the little redhead girl. She does a really great job. Alice Krieg, I think Craig maybe is how you say her last name. She's playing the witch. She does an amazing job. Fantastic casting call there. And the little boy Samuel Leakey playing Hansel also does a great job. He's just very sweet and innocent. All in all, the movie does lag a little bit for me in the second act. It starts off pretty strong and it ends pretty strong, but that second act is sort of difficult to get through. However, I'm just not like a big Oz Perkins fan, I've come to realize. Not yet, anyways. I appreciate what he's doing. Everything that he does is sort of a slow burn, like well thought out, methodical mood piece. Blackcoat's Daughter and I'm the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House. Those movies they're just not particularly for me. I don't think they're terrible or anything. But I would say if you really dig his previous work, you're probably really going to dig this movie. So keep that in mind. I do recommend you check it out. I think it's an incredible thing that this movie is in the theaters and has received a wide release in the year 2020. And of course, we owe that largely to A24, putting out all of these art house horror movies and picking up some traction with them. They keep doing it. They keep making money. So this movie, I believe the budget was $5 million-ish, and the weekend box office, it pulled about $6 million. So it's gonna, over the course of its life in the theater, it'll break even, maybe make a little bit of profit. Nothing crazy, but just the fact that this like really bizarre art house fairy tale folk piece is in the movie theater right now is kind of incredible. And hell, Anthony Perkins' kid directed it. The horror apple does not fall far from the tree, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I recommend you check it out. If not in theaters, definitely when it hits VOD, give it a rental. Throw some love at it, and that way we can keep getting movies like this released. Overall, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 stars. And if you are interested in checking it out, go ahead and give it a watch and then circle back and finish this mini cast because it's going to get spoilery. Here we go.
Spoiler warning.
Spoiler warning dropped. All right. So I kind of gave you the setup of the movie. That's essentially the first act. So the second act, we're sort of hanging out in this cabin with the witch and the kids, and Gretel is sort of, she becomes taken with the witch. Of course, they don't know she's a witch outright yet, but she sees that this woman is she's holding her own in the middle of the woods. She's got all this food. She's got this nice cabin. She's very well put together, and she's just strong-willed, and I think Gretel responds to that positively, and she wants to learn from this lady. She's like, okay, how can I grow up and be strong and self-sufficient like this lady? You know, the land's gone barren. There's no food anywhere, yet she has more than she could ever possibly eat in the world. So she starts learning how to make these like potions and stuff like that. She's flipping through this giant book of, I guess, of potions and maybe some spells in there. I don't know. She's flipping through this book and learning from the witch. And Hansel remembers the fairy tale about the girl in the pink hood from the beginning of the movie. And he's like, hey, don't forget, we need to be careful about these gifts because like this strange lady is giving us all these gifts for seemingly no reason. And he's sort of calling her bluff. He's like, what is she actually getting out of this? She has to be getting something out of it. And at this point in the movie, Gretel's like, no, I won't have it. You know, they're kind of buddy now. She's like, you're talking about my friend and I won't have it. So she like kicks his ass to the curb. She throws him out of the cabin. And it's in the middle of the night. He's all alone, and he gets kind of swept up by the witch, and we don't see him for a little while after that. The next morning, Gretel wakes up, and she's sort of unsure as to whether or not that was a dream, if she actually kicked him out of the cabin, or if she dreamt that she did. But Hansel is nowhere to be found, so she is a little bit worried. She starts asking the witch, like, hey, where's my brother? What's going on? And she's like, oh, he took off in the middle of the night. Maybe it's a good thing that he left us. You know, he's sort of holding you back, and now we can kind of get down to business and do what we got to do. And it's around this point in time in the movie where Gretel's like becoming pretty aware that this lady's a witch. She puts this like salve, this like, I don't know, this goopy looking salve on Gretel's hands, and then she smears some on it's not a broomstick, but I mean it essentially is. It's just this like long piece of wood that sort of forks on one end. And when you have the salve in your hands, if you're, you know, powerful enough or whatever, you can sort of wield this stick. So she does that, and she realizes that, you know, she has some powers like this witch, and you know, with a little bit of teaching, a little bit of schooling, she could become, you know, very, very powerful, not have to fear anybody, and take care of herself. So Gretel then finds this like little hidden doorway in the cupboard, and one night, she crawls down it, and it leads to this massive staircase. It goes down in this huge concrete basement, and there's like a table laid out, and she's hiding on the other side of the table, and she sees the witch. But the witch, up until this point in the movie, has always appeared as a very old lady. But in this scene, she's like very young, and very beautiful, and she has this huge tub, this like metal tub, and she dumps it out on the table, and it's just a bunch of like guts. It's bloody guts. It's like all over the table, and then she reaches into this barrel and pulls out just like a severed arm and throws that on the table, and then raises her hands up into the air, and I guess performs some sort of magic spell, and turns all the blood and guts and viscera into this like beautiful, bountiful feast. So it's at this point in the movie where Gretel realizes, oh my God, me and my brother have been eating guts this whole time. Delicious, sweet, delicious guts this whole time. So she's like, okay, this is wrong. I got to find my brother. I got to get my brother and get out of here. So the next morning, she has a conversation with the witch over some tea, and she's like, I know what's going on here. I know what you're up to. The cat's kind of out of the bag, and I want you to let my brother go. And if you just let my brother go, then I'll do, whatever you want. We'll do witchy things together, and it'll be great. But the witch says she has to eat her brother to truly be free. So it turns out the fairy tale at the beginning of the movie is actually the story about the witch. So the witch is the person who gave birth to the evil little girl in the pink hood. And she ends up eating her child to like sort of free herself of this, quote, poison. She calls her child like a poison. And I guess through that she gets her powers. So she's telling Gretel that she has to eat her poison, which is her brother, who she sees as like holding her back and keeping her from fulfilling herself. And Gretel's not about it. She's like, no, you're absolutely insane in the brain. So the witch poisons Gretel and carries her down into the basement. She sort of locks her wrists to the table in the basement, and she's got Hansel, and there's like a big curtain that sort of moves out of the way, and behind it there's this huge pit, and it's like filled with fire, and there's this cage hanging above it with a ladder leading to it, and Hansel's sort of in a daze. And so the witch is about to cook Hansel and force feed him to Gretel. So Gretel's obviously freaking out. She's calling out to her brother, but he can't snap out of it. So he starts climbing up the ladder slowly to get in the cage, and he's going to be lowered on top of the fire. And the broom is sort of leaning against the wall, and Gretel notices it, and I guess she still had a little bit of salve on her, so she grabs the broom and like makes it fly towards the witch, and the forked end of the broom pins the witch's neck to the wall, and she can't get out of it. And then Gretel just like keeps kind of slinging her forehead towards the broom, and I guess that movement causes the broom to like eventually get so tight that it chops the witch's head clean off, and she just sort of like crumbles into some dust and falls into the fire. Hansel snaps out of it, and he ends up being all right. So it's like a pretty cool kill sequence, actually. I wish there was a little bit more of that happening in this movie. There's some magic, and there's like some blood and guts, but there's really not a whole heck of a lot. I wish they had leaned into that a little bit more, with the witch essentially eating and feeding everybody guts. I wish they had just, made the witch seem a little bit more gross, because I believe she was, but it just felt like maybe a little sugar-coated in the movie, the way it was filmed. Hansel and Gretel are fine. They haul ass on their own. Gretel feels a little more empowered and sure of herself, and she tells her brother that they need to split up and go their own ways, become their own people. And Hansel like finds this little town, and it shows him picking up an axe, like maybe he's going to go be a woodsman, or chop down trees, or I don't know. He's going to go start his own story, which I'm assuming they're setting this up to potentially be a sequel to this film. And we find out, what Gretel's up to, and then maybe they can have another one. We'll find out where Hansel's doing. But they kind of go their own ways, and they live assumedly happily ever after. And ding dong, the witch is dead. That's pretty much the plot. Like I said, the style of the movie, the visuals, the way it's filmed, the cinematography, really are what drive this thing home. I think if I were younger and I saw this, it would leave a bigger impression. But I think, just like I said, I think that if the punches feel a little bit pulled, like they show you a little bit of nastiness, but if they had really leaned into it, I think this movie could have been a lot better, actually. Not that it was bad, but I think it could have been greatly improved. But maybe that's just my sick, twisted mind. I don't know. So 3 out of 5 on this one. The Rotten Tomatoes is currently sitting at the critics is sitting at a 56%. The users is sitting at a 20%, which to me feels unfair. That's pretty low. The movie's not amazing, but it's not that bad. Damn. So the cooter. We gotta go hunting. Talk about the cooter of the week. Here we go.
Cooter of the week.
All right, I did mention there was like an older dude in the beginning of the movie, who's like he's like a lord or something, and Hansel tries to go get a job with him, and he's like just being really terribly inappropriate, and I don't know, he's definitely a cooter. So real quick, what constitutes a cooter? Each movie we look at, we analyze and identify a cooter if there is one in the movie. A cooter is a character type that's consistent of 5 points. Typically, their attire is a little bizarre. It might make them stick out some. They are self-important. They are manipulative. They are sexually deviant, and sometimes they're pathetic. So this guy is like slovenly. He's just sort of like slouching in a chair. He's older and an unkempt looking. He's definitely got the attire going. He's very self-important because he insists that he is referred to as my lord. Definitely kind of full of himself. He's wealthy, doesn't want for anything, unlike everyone around him. He also, it gets really inappropriate, and he asks Gretel if she is intact, essentially asking if she is still a virgin, which if you're just going to be a housekeeper, why the fuck would you ask that, especially of a person this young? I mean, I guess maybe this is a different time or whatever, but it's messed up. Pathetic. I don't really know that the guy is pathetic. Manipulative. I don't know that we get enough of his character to say one way or the other on that, but he's got 3 out of 5, which is all you need to be considered a cooter. The old dude, the Lord, the beginning of the movie, definitely the cooter of this movie. But that's pretty much all my thoughts on Gretel and Hansel. If you guys have seen it or end up seeing it after listening to this episode, let me know what you think. I'm curious to know. I haven't been able to speak to anybody else who has seen this movie yet, so I'd like to know your thoughts. But thanks for stopping by, and as always, until next time, everybody please keep chilling.